her and make her want to teach him. Ian realizes that she is no different from his past life. Ian recalls that even back then, she annoyed him by challenging him. He decides that this time, he will not let Helene start and cuts her off. The kids watch them and murmurs that it is a bit dangerous challenge for Ian to fight Helene. Helene glances at the kids with a smirk and says there seem to be enough spectators. She places her hand on her waist and asks Ian to go first, stating that she will wait for him since she is his teacher. Ian removes his fall cloak and asks Helene if she is sure about it. She smirks at him, asking who is worried for who. Ian smiles and closes his eyes, saying he will not refuse then. Looking at the blue smoke behind Ian, Helene asks if he is planning to set a barrier first because it looks like he has seen stuff. As Helene's side also begins to fill with red smoke, she grins and claims that whatever barrier it is, she will break it in an instant. Squirt. Ian sees the huge fireballs behind Helene and immediately uses his ice block spell, completely shielding himself inside the ice block. Shocked, Helene yells at Ian, asking if he is joking with her. She touches the ice block and says the most he could think of is an ice block. Helene asks him if he is planning to sleep there until he is out of mana. Ian does not move inside the ice block because the ice block is the strongest defensive magic that protects the user, but while it is active, the user falls asleep, so they cannot use other magic. Helene sighs in annoyance, saying that she does not know what Ian is thinking, and that she is the dumb one for having hopes in that. Suddenly everyone hears a shattering sound. The kids wonder what kind of sound it is. Helene looks at the ice block in disbelief when she witnesses Ian staring at her from inside. She wonders how Ian can still move inside the ice block. Helene begins to approach him but suddenly freezes and looks up at the growing stems in front of her. She curses the situation. As Helene tries to run and dodge the attacks, she quickly realizes her efforts are futile. Her strikes aren't landing, and if she doesn't think of something fast, Ian will reach her. Panic sets in as she wonders how to get him out of the ice block. It's nearly impossible to fight him while he's casting spells from within and moving at the same time. Unbeknownst to her, Ian quietly sneaks up behind and catches her off guard. Helene's struggles prove useless as he quickly ties her down, and she can't deny it any longer. He's every bit as skilled as the primal mage they'd warned about. Desperate, she demands to be released, but Ian shows no interest in granting her request. Helene pales as Ian raises his hand, and with a flick of his fingers, the sky above begins to rumble ominously. Fear overtakes her as she realizes what's about to happen, and she begs him to stop. The sky flashes, and a bolt of lightning cracks down at Ian's command, leaving everyone around them speechless. Helene, somehow still alive, lets out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Trembling, she watches as Ian turns away, walking past the crowd without acknowledging their hushed whispers. Days later, the Tower Master learns that Helene hasn't eaten in days. He's appalled, finding it shameful that she'd picked a fight with a 12-year-old and lost. Instead of teaching him a lesson, it was Helene who learned one. The Tower Master believes Ian is a wolf, not a dog that can be trained with ease, and it will take time before he can be molded into something useful. The Tower Master then approaches the Crown Prince, who inquires about the mysterious boy mage, Ian Paige. As Douglas prepares for his first day at school, Ian realizes that Douglas has the potential to become a great alchemist. Meanwhile, Ian himself has already mastered everything he's learning from his private lessons at the Ivory Tower. Bored, he sets his book aside and stands up, thinking that he hasn't had a single day of rest since he returned to the past. Although Ragnar seems to be quiet for now, Ian knows he can't afford to stay idle. He'll need to use this time to strengthen his body and regain his power, but he wonders whether it's okay to spend his time this way. Lost in thought, Ian is interrupted when the housemaid brings him an invitation from the royal palace, which makes him wonder who would want to invite him. Ian picks up the letter and immediately recognizes the Crown Prince's seal. However, Ian doesn't understand the Crown Prince's intentions. It's an unspoken rule that mages of humble background like Ian are rarely invited to such events. Furthermore, the Crown Prince, who despises parties, has gone out of his way to host one. This passivity is the very reason the Crown Prince missed his chance to engage in politics, which led all the aristocrats to turn their backs on him. Unlike his brother Ragnar, the fifth prince, who was socially active and cultivated strong connections with the nobility, the Crown Prince had little interest in such matters, making it easier for Ragnar to take the throne instead of him. Beyond politics, the Crown Prince was also known for his laziness and tendency to ignore his father's advice, even though the Emperor was the only person on his side. Ian can't quite make sense of the Crown Prince's actions, but hopes it's for the best. However, since he's never attended such events, even in his past life, Ian decides it's best to stay quiet and head out as soon as possible. Upon entering the palace, Ian is taken aback by the grandeur of the decorations and the aristocrats mingling with each other. As expected, he feels incredibly uncomfortable in such a setting. The royal servant announces the Crown Prince's arrival, prompting everyone to bow in respect. But instead of delivering the usual speech, the Crown Prince decides to introduce someone first. He looks toward Ian, and Ian immediately thinks it must be him. But the Crown Prince surprises everyone by welcoming Ian Paige as the special guest, the youngest 4th-class High Mage the Tower has ever seen. The Crown Prince explains that the party was organized to introduce Ian to the nobles. Ian wonders if this is just a way for the Crown Prince to show the aristocrats which side he's on. However, this doesn't seem like something the Crown Prince would do, especially not after all his previous passive behavior. The Crown Prince continues by praising Ian's debut at the Ivory Tower, highlighting how Ian became a High Mage on his very first day. He admits that when he first saw Ian in Mogrian, he couldn't understand why he had to go through so much trouble for a country boy, but now he's proud of how incredible Ian turned out to be. Even though it was his father who ordered him to bring Ian to the capital, the Crown Prince now feels a sense of pride in having done so. He then gestures to Ian, leading him to introduce him to someone else. What Ian sees next leaves him utterly speechless. The Crown Prince introduces his younger sister, Hayley, to Ian. She mentions that she has heard a lot about him, but since they don't have much time to chat, she invites him to join her for the next luncheon to hear more of his stories. Ian politely thanks her for the invitation, but humbly suggests that his tales of magic and monsters might be boring. However, Hayley expresses great interest in both magic and monsters, assuring Ian that she'll send him a letter so they can talk more. After bidding him farewell, she leaves, and Ian can't help but notice how different she seems from the last time he saw her at the Memorial Hall. While watching her leave, Ian notices the Crown Prince, who is fulfilling his duties as a host despite his evident nervousness. Ian decides it's better to leave now before he draws any more attention to himself. Stepping out onto the balcony, he spots Sir Oliver and compliments him on his uniform. The brief moment of awkward silence makes Ian realize the balcony might not have been the best place to retreat to. Sir Oliver then strikes up a conversation, mentioning he heard about Ian's duel with Helene. Ian realizes that the Crown Prince had also mentioned the same thing about his fight with Helene, and comments on how strange it is that such rumors spread so quickly, especially considering most of what happens in the Ivory Tower is supposed to be classified. Oliver responds that a knight wouldn't survive if he didn't know how to gather information, especially in times like these. Ian agrees, understanding the weight of the situation. Times like these, he mutters, referring to the way a handful of mages have dominated the Empire's military power, leaving knights to become mere ornaments with little real influence. Oliver continues, saying he's impressed by Ian, not just for becoming the youngest 4th-class High Mage, but also for defeating Helene, the Lady of Fire. He adds that it's obvious the Crown Prince is backing Ian, as everyone knows how much the prince dislikes these social events, yet he went to the trouble of hosting one for Ian. Concerned, Oliver then asks where Ian's allegiance lies. It's widely known that the mages of the Ivory Tower support the 5th Prince, so Oliver wonders if Ian might be aligned with him. Ian dismisses the question, saying it's impossible to give a clear answer in these circumstances. However, Oliver, as the Crown Prince's knight, insists on knowing if Ian is an ally or an enemy. Oliver Raywood is a loyal knight who stood by the Crown Prince until his last breath, and trusting in that loyalty, Ian decides to be honest with him. He admits that he's not sure yet where he stands, but he's certain of one thing: he'll never be in favor of the 5th Prince. Oliver looks around, checking if anyone overheard their conversation, but Ian reassures him by casting a spell to make sure no one else can hear them. Oliver then asks if Ian would be willing to be his training partner until he makes up his mind. Ian declines, pointing out 2 reasons. First, he worries that Oliver might come after him once he learns how to fight a mage. Second, there's nothing in it for him. Although Oliver can't promise he won't come after Ian later, he offers him a necklace. He explains that the Queen gave it to him on the day he was appointed as the Crown Prince's knight. The Queen had told him that it was enchanted with a spell that could clear his mind. Ian recognizes the necklace as one of the treasures that was never found in his past life, with its last known owner being the Queen. Oliver offers the necklace to Ian, telling him that it would be of much more use to Ian than to a knight like himself. He explains that the Queen gave it to him as a token of his duty to protect the Crown Prince at all costs, and by giving it to Ian, he feels it would be the best way to honor her, certain that she would understand his decision. Ian accepts the necklace, but just as he does, a sudden blast diverts their attention. Upon hearing the explosions erupting around the royal palace, Ian and Oliver rush inside. Concerned for the safety of the Crown Prince, Oliver begins searching for him. He approaches the Crown Prince and his sister Hayley, and checks if they are unharmed. After confirming the Crown Prince is fine, Oliver turns to the royal guards to inquire about the situation outside. The guards inform him that the explosions are originating from inside the palace, and the emergency communications network has been activated. All forces are currently investigating the cause. The mention of the emergency communications network catches Ian's attention. The royal palace's emergency network connects all the orders of knights, the Imperial Army's headquarters, and the Ivory Tower. It's the only system capable of gathering all forces when the palace is in danger. If the emergency network has been activated, that means every Imperial soldier and mage will soon converge on the royal palace. Ian wonders if that's what the explosions were meant to accomplish. Struck by a sudden realization, he casts a mana barrier around Haley and the Crown Prince. He then asks Haley if she knows how to inject mana into the barrier, explaining that her help would be useful. Ian moves on to the maids, asking if anyone by the name of Isabel is around. One maid confirms Isabel was assigned to the Queen's castle but wanted to see the party, which confirms Ian's suspicion. It's not Isabel they're after, it's Cecilia. The explosions were just a distraction, meant to divert attention while they move in on her, especially now that the Ivory Tower's guard is down. Ian couldn't care less about what happens to Cecilia, but he knows he must prevent anyone from learning what she knows about him. Meanwhile, a hooded man approaches the cell where Cecilia is being held. He's surprised to find her still alive. Cecilia doesn't recognize him, but the man reveals his identity and expresses disappointment in her, saying he thought she'd be better than this. As he removes his hood, Cecilia recognizes him immediately and desperately rushes towards him, begging him to get her out. But Daniel, for that's who it is, has other plans. Cecilia tells him she didn't say anything. It was Paige who knew everything about the Cold Walkers, and even the mana engraving she herself didn't know existed. She adds that Ian also knew about the mana engraving, which was a secret even she wasn't aware of. Daniel responds that this is information most Cold Walkers didn't know, and it wasn't until things spiraled out of control that the higher-ups revealed it. He asks if she has anything else to say. Cecilia pleads for her life and insists on her innocence, begging him to let her go. Daniel opens the cell, and as Cecilia steps out, her eyes widen in shock when he suddenly stabs her. She collapses to her knees, blood pouring from her wound. He tells her she was locked up because she didn't know what she was doing, and that it caused quite a disturbance. He adds that a third-class mage like her is rare, and there were talks of rescuing her. As Cecilia lies on the floor, coughing and bleeding out, he bids her farewell. But then, another voice from behind interrupts him. Surprised, Daniel quickly turns and throws a dagger at Ian, but Ian easily dodges it with a slight tilt of his head. Daniel doesn't recognize Ian at all. As Ian glances at Cecilia's lifeless body on the floor, he feels no remorse. In his mind, it's one less problem to worry about. Before Daniel can make a move or respond, Ian freezes his leg with ice, rendering him immobile. Ian steps closer and declares that he'd wanted to kill Daniel with his own hands. Daniel tries to negotiate for his life, but Ian interrupts him, saying he's finally able to avenge his friends. Daniel hadn't killed any of Ian's friends, at least not yet, and maybe not even 10 years from now. The ice continues to creep over Daniel's body, encasing him completely. Ian calmly announces that he's already made up his mind to set things right. With a tap of his finger, the ice shatters, and Daniel's cold, lifeless body collapses to the ground. Ian steps up to the dead body and examines the mana engravings on the back of Daniel's neck. They should be enough to get the answers he needs. While Ian stands over Daniel's body, he hears footsteps approaching. The Tower Master finds Ian standing over the bodies, but he has no idea what transpired. As Ian and the Tower Master face each other, the mana engraving on the back of Daniel's neck begins to glow. Meanwhile, His Majesty, the Emperor, is furious with the Tower Master for his ignorance of the threats lurking inside the palace. First, a maid, and now the Secretary of the Family. The Emperor had granted the Tower Master full investigative rights to get to the heart of the problem, but seeing the Tower Master's incompetence, the Emperor loses faith in the Ivory Tower. He announces that he is revoking all investigative rights granted to the organization. The Emperor demands the Tower Master disclose any findings he has gathered to the royal family, the Order of the Knights, and the Imperial Army, before dismissing him with little more than a curt command to leave. After the Tower Master bows respectfully and exits, a royal servant steps forward to invite Ian to approach and pay his respects to the Emperor. Paige steps before the Emperor, who thanks him for protecting the Empire from external threats. The Emperor remarks that, if not for Ian, they might have unwittingly handed critical information to unknown enemies. Without Ian's intervention, the royal family and the Empire would have been the subject of ridicule among the other kingdoms. As a token of gratitude for his contributions to the Empire's safety, the Emperor personally rewards Ian. He offers him the robe once belonging to Mitchell Greenriver, the Emperor's ancestor and the only mage in the Imperial family. According to his will, the robe was originally meant for royals only, but the Emperor chooses to give it to Ian as a lease, with the agreement that it will expire when Ian either dies or no longer wishes to possess it. Ian recalls the stories of Mitchell Greenriver, a hero of the Empire who was even appointed as the Tower Master for his exceptional magical abilities. Even in his past life, Ian had never had the chance to see this robe. As it is a robe, Ian does not need to undress to try it on, and the Emperor encourages him to put it on. When Ian wears it, however, the Emperor notices that it is a little too large for him, suggesting that Ian will grow into it over time, but Ian quickly senses that the robe is enchanted with magic. He declares that he can make it fit him perfectly. Using his magic, he adjusts the robe to his size, leaving everyone around him astounded. The Emperor praises how well the robe suits Ian, especially its blue color, and Ian bows respectfully, thanking His Majesty. Later, Ian meets Lady Haley outside, who hesitates before speaking. She mentions that she wishes to discuss what happened the last time they interacted. Ian apologizes, admitting that his actions were out of line due to the extreme circumstances at the time. He reassures her that what she fears will not happen again. As they converse, someone approaches from behind Ian and comments that what Ian did was incredibly honorable and brought peace to the Empire. Ian turns around to see a boy dressed like a prince. Like the Emperor, the boy praises Ian's role in the royal palace. Ian's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the boy. This is the prince walking toward him. The prince introduces himself as Ragnar Greenriver, the fifth heir to the Emperor. A sudden flashback grips Ian's attention, showing a glass of wine spilled on the floor beside a much older Ian. Ragnar stands above him, telling Ian that he should never forgive him. As Ragnar congratulates Ian on his appointment to the High Mage of the Ivory Tower, one thought runs through Ian's mind. This is too early. Now is not the time to meet him yet. Ragnar invites Ian to the day's luncheon, but Ian's fist clenches in anger. Before he can respond, Haley interrupts, informing Ragnar that Ian has already promised to join her. Ragnar suggests meeting the next day, but Ian refuses again, prompting Ragnar to suggest rescheduling for another time before walking away. This encounter is happening 2 years earlier than when Ian originally met Ragnar. Ragnar is still a young prince, hiding his ambitions beneath a facade. Ian decides that he will interfere in every possible way to prevent Ragnar from expanding his influence and ultimately ensure his downfall. This time, Ian will be the mastermind behind Ragnar's eventual demise. Fast forward to 5 years later, the Crown Prince is annoyed and frustrated over the overly complicated book. He complains about the difficulty of the book. The teacher tells him the book is called The Principle of Sovereignty, written by the first emperor himself. It covers the virtues a future king should have, as well as effective methods for ruling a kingdom. The Crown Prince looks at the pile of books about the kingdom's history, philosophy, economy, politics, and etiquette, and decides he's done for the day. The teacher tells him his father will scold him if he skips another class, but he shows no care. Since it's Sir Oliver's last training session with Ian, the Crown Prince decides to go watch that instead. Meanwhile, at the knight's main training field, Sir Oliver stands holding his sword firmly and thinks to himself, this is his last chance to defeat Ian in training. He clenches his sword tight in his grip and takes a look around. Ice spears rain from above. As he dodges the ice attack, the ground around him lifts up. Oliver runs through and jumps out the walls of mud. He then takes a look around to see what's next, and in that moment, a huge fire blast comes his way. Oliver thinks quickly, raises his sword, and splits the pyroblast with the swing of his sword. He finds Ian standing on the other side of the pyroblast. Oliver is determined to get him this time. He runs forward, with a sword in his hands, and finally, he places the sword directly at Ian's heart. However, Ian suddenly disappears and taps Oliver from behind and tells him he did good. Oliver does not seem all too happy with his performance. All that training and he couldn't even leave a scratch on Ian. However, Ian assures him that he aimed directly for the heart, and if could get hurt, he would have died. After a successful final training session, they shake hands, and Oliver thanks Ian and says what he learned was worth much more than the necklace he gave him. Ian tells Oliver he has improved greatly in the last 5 years, and even he didn't know a steel sword could split a pyroblast in two. Oliver asks Ian what level he is on. Ian, embarrassed to tell the truth, just says it's not as high as he might think. Right now, Ian is a 5th class master, and it wasn't until he was 26 in his past life that he reached 5th class. He's making quick progress, but his goal is to become a 6th class master at least. Unfortunately, Ian couldn't speed up the growth of his body or mana heart, so 5th class master was the best he could do. Now he's just waiting for his body to be fully grown. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince claps for Ian and Oliver's fabulous performance and says they both are the best knight and mage in the kingdom. Because it is the last day of training, the Crown Prince suggests the three of them have breakfast together, and he will have the best meal prepared to celebrate the strength of his left and right-hand men. However, Ian declines because today is also the day he finishes Ivory Tower's curriculum and receives his first duty as High Mage, so he needs to go meet the Tower Master right away. This disappoints the prince at first, but he tells Ian to leave now. They'll have time to dine together soon. Ian says he'll save some time for him and lifts up in the sky. As he says his goodbye and flies away, the prince looks up and says the fact that the robe his father gave Ian was enchanted with a flying spell makes him a little jealous. The crown prince asks Oliver if he's ready to take on a mage now because he saw him neck and neck with Ian just now. But Oliver says that he can't even leave a scratch on Ian, and that gap is only going to grow with time. However, if he were to go against other mages, he's quite sure he could take them. Back at the ivory tower, seeing Ian grow from a boy to a man made the tower master feel old. As he reviewed Ian's reports, he found nothing but praise throughout. It was no surprise the young mages held Ian in such high regard. He was the closest thing to a perfect mage the tower master had ever seen. He informed Ian that today marked his final day as an apprentice. If Ian had been a student at the academy, he would have been sent off to other lands after graduation, but for Ian, the situation was different. All that remained on his last day as an apprentice was a conversation with the tower master. Ian politely accepted the opportunity to chat. The tower master congratulated Ian on officially becoming the High Mage of the Empire and handed him a tablet. The tablet would allow Ian to summon soldiers or workers from any city within the Empire, something he would need in the future. When Ian asked if there was a particular place he should focus on, the tower master mentioned several locations. High mages were rare these days, even more so after Helene's disappearance, and they desperately needed Ian's abilities. Ian was considered the best battle force the ivory tower possessed, which came with immense responsibility. However, the tower master left the final decision up to Ian, as it was his first mission. Ian recognized some of the places on the list. There was Rodmier, home to the largest port city in the Empire; Benson, known for producing the most steel on the continent; and Fierig, to the east of the capital, where Ian had been sent in his past life after the previous mage there had died in an accident. Ian found Fierig particularly intriguing. The tower master explained that Fierig had the most urgent request. Despite sending 2 third-class mages and even the imperial army, the monster herd from the grasslands had still caused widespread destruction. Ian was given a page detailing the situation and asked to provide his answer by the end of the day. If he declined, the tower master would simply find another candidate, but Ian agreed to go. At home, Douglas was surprised to hear Ian was heading to Fierig, given its reputation for dangerous monsters. Ian glared at Douglas, and his mother, concerned, asked if it was truly as perilous as they said. Ian reassured her that it wasn't dangerous, and that his position was temporary. He'd be back in a few months if all went well. His mother mentioned the mansion would feel lonesome without him, but Ian promised he'd return soon. Douglas, eager to help, asked Ian to take a look at his elixir, thinking it might be useful in Fierig. Meanwhile, Douglas's father suggested that he change the way he addressed Ian. In confusion, Douglas proposed calling Ian brother, which left everyone in the room stunned. Ian's mother, delighted by the suggestion, seemed pleased to have a new son. She even imagined that Ian must be happy as well. As Douglas and his father continued to bicker about how to address Ian, he took a moment to observe his family. Their little quarrels, his mother's giggling, and the warmth of the moment made him realize that maybe this wasn't so bad after all. However, he firmly insisted that Douglas refrain from calling him brother. Ian stands outside, preparing to say his goodbyes, but first he plans to stop by the ivory tower to bid farewell to the tower master. Before leaving, he takes a moment to brief Mr. Heyman on the mana traps he's installed at the mansions. Mr. Heyman assures Ian that he knows the traps inside and out and promises to protect Mrs. Paige with his life. Douglas, noticing Ian's irritation, addresses him as brother, but quickly corrects himself to captain. He hands Ian a bottle of elixir, similar to the ones his father makes. Leaning in, Douglas whispers that his version is much better. Although Douglas still has 3 years to go before graduating from the Imperial Academy of Alchemy, Ian has no doubt that he's already proven himself to be the next Imperial alchemist. He's certain Douglas's elixir will be highly effective. When asked, Ian tells him that he plans to take a wagon to the capital's outskirts first, as he doesn't want to attract too much attention by flying. Meanwhile, Ian's mother comes by to offer him some snacks for his journey. She reminds him to finish the contents of the first container by the end of the day, as the other containers have jerky and dried fruit that will last longer. She's also packed his favorite red bean pies. Ian hugs her, assuring her that he'll take care of himself and will return before she knows it. As he leaves, Ian comes to terms with the fact that he needs to have faith in her safety, even when he's not around. The mansion is under the protection of the royal family, and the city's public security is solid. Plus, there's the mana trap, the last resort, which can only be activated by his mother, Rotheo, or Douglas. He's installed enough of them to ensure that any intruders can be dealt with in his absence, so he's confident Mrs. Paige will be fine. As Ian heads off, he reflects that it's been 25 years since he last set foot in Fierig. Meanwhile, in Fierig, an army of monsters attacks a camp. The army captain shouts orders to his soldiers, warning them not to die before they bring him the heads of 100 monsters. As the soldiers fight, another one arrives with news that the supply unit in the rear has been attacked by orcs who crossed the mountain. This surprises the captain since orcs typically fight on the front lines, making their appearance at the rear unexpected. He quickly orders mages in squads 2 and 3 to hold the fort while squad 1 accompanies him to the rear. The captain mounts his horse, unsheathes his sword, and leads the squad to intercept the orcs. He commands them to eliminate any orc they see. Despite the orcs' lack of intelligence, their strength lies in their unity. The supply unit, inexperienced and unprepared, is no match for the orcs. The captain fears he might be too late as he spurts his horse on, racing toward the rear. Suddenly, it begins to snow. The canyon ahead is blocked by an ice wall, and the monsters freeze solid. The unexpected change in weather confuses the captain, but then he spots someone standing atop the ice wall. With everything frozen around him, the man steps down. The soldiers quickly surround him, spears pointed at him, demanding that he reveal himself. The man, calm and composed, says he was told they were desperate for support, and introduces himself as Paige, a high mage sent by the ivory tower, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The captain, clearly impressed, praises Ian's great victory against the goblin army of Mogrian Mountain and extends a hand to him. Lord Calian Pierrick, intrigued, asks if Ian might spare a moment of his time because there's much to discuss. Lord Calian explains that while the attack was expected, the scale of it was not. The monsters seem determined to destroy them, which leads him to believe that something is wrong in the Great Plains. He goes on to explain that he made 2 requests to the palace and the ivory tower. The first was for soldiers and supplies to continue holding off the monsters, and the second was for a capable high mage who could end this threat once and for all. Lord Calian expresses his admiration for Ian's power, particularly the ice wall and the great force with which he destroyed the goblin army. While Ian's actions have bought them some time by blocking up the canyon, Lord Calian points out that this is only a temporary solution. The Empire is at war with monsters from across the Great Plains. After years of continuous fighting, the soldiers are weary, and supplies are running low. Had the soldiers and supplies Lord Calian requested arrived, they could have kept up the fight, but it seems the Empire has turned down his plea. Now that Ian has come instead of a full army, Lord Calian suggests finding a more sustainable solution. Ian reassures him that the ice wall will last for about 10 days, during which time they can monitor the mountains for any monsters that may attempt to cross. In those 10 days, Ian plans to investigate the Great Plains to uncover the cause of the problem and, if possible, find a solution. Lord Calian is impressed by Ian's confidence, but points out that even the numerous soldiers he sent over the past few months have returned with no results. All they've discovered is that the monsters, once divided, have now joined forces and are only attacking humans, rather than each other. He gestures to the map and explains that the monsters are not just attacking the Green River Empire, but also the Coldwood Empire to the north and the Principality of Roe to the west. While some nations are less affected due to fewer access points, the majority of the attacks are concentrated on the Pierrick estate, thanks to the Great Serpent's Gorge, which allows the monsters to attack in larger numbers. What confounds Lord Calian, however, is that the Aboriginal clan on the southern border has not been attacked by the monsters. It's as though something is keeping the monsters at bay there. While they suspect the cause of the recent turmoil lies in the south, the waves of monsters have been too overwhelming to allow them to break through and reach the lands of the native tribes. Ian realizes that the situation in the Great Plains is unlike anything he's witnessed in his past life. While there were small waves of monsters invading the Empire before, this level of invasion is unprecedented. He tells Lord Calian that he should personally visit the southern border to meet with the Aboriginal clan. Lord Calian acknowledges that if the clan's leader is the Shaman King, then he may know something crucial about the issue. Meanwhile, Ian gazes up at the beautiful night sky over the Great Plains, lost in thought. He believes that the artifact, the Staff of the Great Plains, should still be in place. The staff, once given to the leader of the natives, the Shaman King, had always fascinated Ian. He had always had a particular fondness for it, as birch tree staffs are quite rare. In 3 years, the Green River Empire, the Coldwood Empire, and the Principality of Roe will unite to form a joint army to eradicate the monsters from the Great Plains. The monsters will be largely banished, and each nation will claim a portion of the plains and its resources. During that time, the Shaman King will disappear, and the natives will be enslaved. However, something that never happened in Ian's previous life has occurred, and his return might just be the catalyst for that change. Ian tells Lord Calian that the ice wall will begin to thaw and break after 10 days. In the meantime, he plans to investigate the cause of the recent changes and figure out a way to resolve it. However, should he not return within those 10 days, Ian expresses his confidence in Lord Calian to manage the situation. Ian flies through the Great Plains and lands at a mountain marking the start of the Aboriginals' territory. To his surprise, the area is eerily quiet. While the north is overrun by thousands of monsters, Ian hasn't encountered a single one on his journey south, which leads him to think that perhaps Lord Kalian was right. The cause of the change must lie somewhere within these lands. As Ian walks deeper into the area, the natives immediately take notice of his presence. Standing alert, Ian calmly introduces himself, explaining that he is a mage from the Green River Empire and that he comes in peace. The natives, intrigued, ask him where he learned their language. Ian dismisses their question, saying it's not important, and demands to meet the Shaman King, leaving the natives in shock. To the natives, the Shaman King is the equivalent of a tower master, but instead of being trained as a magician, the Shaman King is born with both a mana heart and a mana brain, and is raised as a shaman. The King of Shamans, therefore, is the rightful ruler of the tribe. Ian presses further, stating that he wishes to discuss the monster invasions in the north, and that the Shaman King should be aware of the strange occurrences. The natives are offended by Ian's bold request to see their king and raise their spears against him. They warn him to leave or face being sacrificed to the spirits of the Great Plains. Frustrated with the lack of civility, Ian refuses to back down. He calmly tells them he won't leave just because they tell him to. One of the natives attacks him with a spear, but Ian swiftly blocks it with his own ice spear, slicing the weapon in half. He threatens the natives, telling them that if they don't bring the Shaman King, the next thing to fly off will be their leader's head. At that moment, the Shaman King appears and asks why someone from the Empire would seek him out. Ian turns to face him, and at a glance his eyes fall on the staff the Shaman King holds. He immediately recognizes the leader and begins explaining the situation. The monsters of the Great Plains are attacking the borders of the 3 neighboring nations. However, despite traveling through the region, Ian hasn't encountered a single monster headed south. He asks the Shaman King if he knows why the monsters are only invading the northern lands. The Shaman King answers dismissively, stating that monster invasions of human territories are not unusual, and the natives have no knowledge of why this is happening. Ian, however, can see through the Shaman King's words and demands that he tell the truth. The accusation offends the Shaman King's people, but he motions for them to stop. The Shaman King reveals that he has heard of the Empire's lie-detecting magic, and although he is impressed to see it in action, he agrees to tell Ian the truth. He recounts a prophecy foretelling that the Great Plains will one day be consumed by an ocean of flames, with its light painting the land red. The natives, who have lived in the region for thousands of years, will be torn apart and enslaved. Although they know they can do nothing to stop such a war, they can't just sit idly by, waiting and hoping the prophecy will turn out to be false. Then one day, a woman came to them, shared her power, and inscribed some magic onto the staff. Before disappearing, she told them that if a stranger ever arrived in their lands, they could not let him leave. With a thundering strike, the Shaman King slams his staff onto the ground, and suddenly, a ring of fire surrounds them. The clanspeople begin transforming into monstrous creatures, and the Shaman King turns to Ian, declaring that he must die here. Ian immediately recognizes the dark magic at play. He thought black magic had been eradicated and forbidden 3 centuries ago, but now it seems that history has taken a turn for the worse. The natives, underestimating Ian, believe they have the upper hand. But Ian is no ordinary mage. He isn't about to die without a fight. With steely determination, he resolves to take the staff, now tainted with black magic, from the Shaman King, even if he must use force to do so. The Shaman King, unflinching, dares him to try, confident that Ian will not succeed. Lord Pierrick stood anxiously, his mind swirling with worry as he thought about Ian. It had been 10 long days since the magician had ventured into the Great Plains, and the ice wall blocking the canyon entrance was about to melt any moment now. Pierrick couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him, wondering what could have happened to Ian, and what would unfold if this situation continued. But forcing himself to refocus, Lord Pierrick called for Ardal. When Ardal responded, Lord Pierrick instructed him to follow the plan, setting up an outpost at the canyon. He told Ardal to gather all available troops from their territory, station them in the canyon, and even bring the catapult, along with the subjugation squad guarding the mountain paths. Ardal bowed deeply, placing his hand over his heart, and promised to return to his squad. Once Ardal left, Lord Pierrick closed his eyes, concentrating hard, willing himself to draw on his inner strength. He reminded himself that he and his men only needed to defend their land. Vowing to protect his territory and people, he resolved to become the Empire's strongest, most steadfast shield. With that determination in his heart, he opened his eyes, now filled with a sense of immense responsibility. When all his men and the catapult had been stationed, Lord Pierrick stood at the front, sword in hand, instructing his troops to prepare the catapult. Just as he shouted for them to be ready, a figure emerged from the fog. As Lord Pierrick focused on the figure, his eyes widened in shock. There, walking toward them, Panting heavily and clutching something in one hand while holding a staff in the other, was none other than Ian Paige. The magician, breathless and disheveled, had a cloud of black smoke swirling around his head. Lord Pierrick shouted for Ian, but before he could grasp the situation, Ian, with great effort, forbade them to touch the staff under any circumstances. Then, without warning, Ian collapsed unconscious. Pierrick, frantic with worry, shouted his name in desperation. When Ian regained consciousness, he found himself lying shirtless in a strange room. His torso was bandaged, and he could sense the dull ache of his body. At first, he wondered if he had made it back to the Lord's castle. Carefully, he sat up, a wave of dizziness hitting him, and he realized that he had indeed returned. He decided to focus on settling the staff first. Before Ian could fully orient himself, Lord Pierrick and Ardal barged into his room without knocking, both speaking urgently. They'd been waiting for him to wake up. Seeing them, Ian asked how long he had been unconscious, to which Lord Pierrick replied that he had been out for days. He asked Ian how he was feeling, mentioning that the doctor had said he shouldn't be moving yet. Before Lord Pierrick could continue with the doctor's advice, Ian swung his legs off the bed, declaring that he was fine. When Ian asked about the staff he had brought back, Lord Pierrick pointed to a box and explained that the staff was inside, guarded by other magicians. He added that the box was specially made with magic similar to Mana Hell, designed to protect it. Ian walked over to the box and, after inspecting it, nodded in approval, thanking Lord Pierrick for handling it so well. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Lord Pierrick asked Ian a question he had been reluctant to voice. He mentioned that when Ian had arrived, he was in a state where both his mana and stamina were drained, and if he had arrived even a little later, his life could have been in danger. Lord Pierrick, while trying to tread carefully, admitted that it might be rude to ask so soon after Ian's recovery, but he couldn't help himself. What had put Ian in such a perilous condition? There was a long, uncomfortable silence after Pierrick's question, leaving him anxious about what had happened in the Great Pains. Finally, Ian spoke up. Slowly, he retrieved the staff from the box, revealing that the staff was the cause of the strange events in the Great Pains. The revelation left both Lord Pierrick and Ardal stunned. Ian went on to explain that the staff was imbued with black magic, and a shaman had used it to control the monsters in the area, wielding both black magic and illusionary magic. At the mention of black magic, Pierrick's mind went blank. He immediately asked Ian if he was suggesting that black magic, thought to have perished 300 years ago, was still in existence. Ian confirmed that the Shaman King had received the black magic from an unknown source. Unfortunately, Ian, who had investigated the matter, had been unable to trace the culprit. Ian continued, saying that after the Shaman King's death, the black and illusionary magic had dissipated, and the monsters in the Great Pains had begun attacking the new owner of the staff. He suspected it was some sort of curse placed to destroy the evidence. He couldn't help but sarcastically thank whoever was responsible, saying it had been incredibly difficult for him to return with the staff in hand. Still trying to process the situation, Lord Pierrick asked why Ian hadn't simply destroyed the staff or thrown it away, if it was so dangerous. Surprisingly, Ian responded that he actually liked the staff, continuing to work on it with his own magic. Pierrick, perplexed, asked if Ian truly liked it just for that reason. Ian nodded and declared that the magic in the staff had been fully cleansed. Just as Ian spoke those words, he suddenly winced, clutching his chest in pain. His body began to tremble uncontrollably, especially his legs. The pain intensified and Ian groaned, his confusion deepening. Pierrick's face filled with concern as he called out Ian's name, asking if he was okay. Ian, still unable to understand what was happening to him, feared it might be connected to his mana heart. Then, without warning, he coughed up blood, staining his hands and chest. As Ian continues to cough up blood, Callian grows increasingly worried, and in a panic, asks if he's alright. He urgently orders Ardal to go get a doctor immediately. However, just as Ardal is about to leave, Ian reassures Lord Pierrick that he's fine, casually stating that he's simply shedding. Lord Pierrick looks at him, confused, and repeats the word shedding in a questioning tone. Ian explains that it's a process that happens when a mana heart that hasn't fully developed yet breaks through to a new class, so there's no need to worry. Still visibly concerned, Lord Pierrick asks Ian once more if he's truly alright. Ian reassures him again, confirming that he's fine. As the blood staining his hands and torso disappears into thin air, Ian reflects that if he's right, he's just advanced from a 5th-class master to a 6th-class magician. Looking at his hands, he realizes that he now feels a massive surge of mana, which is distinctly different from what he's felt before. Lord Pierrick sighs in relief but, still cautious, insists on getting a doctor to check on Ian. Ian thanks him for his concern. Lord Pierrick then mentions that he might be taking up a lot of Ian's time, but he has something to give him. He explains that 3 days after Ian left for the Great Plains, the Ivory Tower sent him a letter. He presents Ian with a box containing a crystal ball saying that they were instructed to give it to him once his mission was complete. However, since Ian had lost consciousness, they are only able to deliver it now. As Lord Pierrick extends his hand to give the box to Ian, Ian takes the crystal ball, confused about why the ivory tower would send him a letter. Just as he's about to open it, Lord Pierrick asks him to wait, saying there's one more thing they were told to give Ian. He pulls out a letter from his pocket and hands it to Ian, explaining that it came directly from the Emperor by way of a horseman, with strict instructions to deliver it to Ian personally. The mention of a horseman catches Ian off guard, and Lord Pierrick confirms it. Ian realizes that the Emperor didn't send this letter through the ivory tower, but rather used a more direct and unreliable method, sending a paper letter through a horseman, which could potentially be delayed or not reach him at all. He wonders if the Emperor's message contains something the ivory tower can't know about, so he decides to read the ivory tower's letter first. Ian opens the letter contained in the crystal ball and reads it aloud. As the contents of this letter might affect your current mission, we have asked for it to be given to you only after it has ended. It was an inevitable decision, and we hope you understand our situation. There has been a slight commotion within our household. An unknown suspicious person invaded your mansion, but we were able to protect your family and assets by mobilizing the Imperial troops. The mention of a suspicious person shocks Ian, and his growing panic is visible to Lord Pierrick. The letter continues. Currently, the Imperial family and the Ivory Tower are providing the best protection possible for your family. We would like to assure you that there is no need for concern. After finishing the letter, Ian clenches his fist in anger, his thoughts racing. He wonders what Tower Master Herbert is up to, calling it a worrying letter. He then resolves to read the Emperor's letter. The letter from the Emperor reads, "If this letter reaches you safely, then it means that both my son and I are not out of luck yet. We thank the goddess of luck. I have a request. You, being a high-rank magician currently on a mission, may not have heard the news yet, but the treaty regarding the subjugation of monsters in the eastern part of the Great Plains will take place in the free city of Demadera." Ian's eyes widen in shock. He had been under the impression that the subjugation treaty wouldn't take place for another 3 years. The letter continues. The Crown Prince, Hayden Greenriver, the Fifth Prince, Ragnar Greenriver, the Ivory Tower Master, Herbert Leon, and our Empire's Great General, Duncan Matose, have been selected to be part of the delegation. By the time you are reading this, the delegation should already be on their way to Demadera. Notably, there is no one in the delegation who is aligned with the Crown Prince. Therefore, I am requesting that you, Ian Paige, a friend of the Crown Prince, head to Demadera and offer him your support. I will also invite your family into the Imperial Palace and guarantee them the highest level of protection. Ian closes his eyes as he thinks over the contents of the letter. He reflects that the Demadera Treaty marks the beginning of Ragnar's political campaign for the throne, and it's the moment when the Crown Prince's shortcomings are exposed. Ragnar's diplomatic skill during this treaty gives the Green River Empire a significant advantage, causing both the nobles and commoners to take notice of his abilities. This marks the start of the Crown Prince's fall from grace, as his incompetence becomes public knowledge. Ian wonders whether all of this is part of Tower Master Herbert's plan, considering the recent events and his own memories from his previous life. The sudden changes in the eastern Great Plains, the Sorcerer King who received black magic from an unknown woman, and the early treaty between the 3 countries, it all seems to be connected to the Tower Master somehow. The suspicious people who invaded his mansion likely play a role in trying to hold him back. While Ian acknowledges that this is still just a theory, he feels that they might have figured him out. Despite everything, Ian considers ignoring the Emperor's request and heading back immediately. However, something unexpected occurs. Magic. Unlike anything even the Tower Master could have foreseen. A level of magic that isn't recorded anywhere in the world. A 6th-class magic that only a 6th-class magician can wield. Hesitant, Ian calls out to Lord Pierrick, who reassures him that he's free to speak. Ian then asks Lord Pierrick if he can do him a favor. Demadera, known by many names, freedom, neutrality, commerce, port, was a place of many faces and even more significance. With his arms crossed in concern, Heidi, the Crown Prince, nervously asks if they can just summon Ian now. Oliver, ever composed, tells him to calm down, reminding him that he's representing their empire in this meeting. He assures Hayden that no one here would dare harm him as the Crown Prince. Still uneasy, Hayden admits he knows that but can't shake the feeling of discomfort. Hayden tries to explain to Oliver that he might already be aware of this, but most of their empire's delegations, including the Tower Master, are leaning toward Ragnar's side. He doesn't like how things are unfolding and wishes Ian were by his side in times like this. Upon hearing Hayden's concerns, Oliver is left speechless. Meanwhile, Herbert, who stands among the gathered crowd, silently acknowledges that the time is ripe. He reflects on how they've been planning for this moment for a long time. He knows that Kiddo is probably rushing back to the capital now, Confident in his understanding of Ian's behavior, he predicts that Ian would willingly become a traitor to protect his family, as they are his top priority. Herbert is jolted out of his thoughts when he hears the people around him pointing toward the sky, murmuring in confusion about what they see. One person asks if it's a bird, but to everyone's shock, including Hayden's, it's none other than Ian himself. As Ian lands smoothly on the ground, he bows to Hayden, apologizing for his tardiness. Ragnar and his men seethe with anger at Ian's unexpected arrival, having believed he wouldn't make it. Herbert, too, is stunned. He can hardly believe that Ian chose to stand with the Crown Prince over his own family. Back at the Green River Diem Imperial Palace, Douglas sighs in boredom. He lounges on the couch, lamenting that he's stuck here because of the suspicious intruder and unable to visit the academy or meet his friends. This, he grumbles, is making him incredibly restless. Ratheo, standing nearby, tells him to bear with it a little longer, adding that they should be grateful to even be in the Imperial Palace during this time. He acknowledges that it was a relief the Imperial Knights managed to capture the intruder before Ian's mana trap could be triggered, noting that if the trap had gone off, the intruder would have been reduced to dust. Noticing Vanessa's silence, Ratheo reassures her not to worry too much, pointing out that they are in the Emperor's residence, the safest place on Earth. However, Vanessa remains lost in thought, clearly anxious for her son's safety. Ratheo begins to wonder if the Ivory Tower sent a letter to Ian. As he tries to comfort everyone, saying Ian would surely arrive soon, the door suddenly opens. Ian steps in, his calm demeanor confirming his arrival. He casually asks if he's late, leaving everyone in awe. They quickly rise to meet him, and Ian takes Vanessa's hand, acknowledging their worry. He assures them that they can rest easy now, as he will protect them all. The night before, at Lord Pierric's castle, Ian speaks to Lord Pierric, making a request. Lord Pierric, eager to repay Ian for his previous help, reminds Ian of how he saved him and his territory. He promises to grant Ian any request, no matter the nature. When Ian finally shares his request, it surprises Lord Pierric. He asks for protection. Lord Pierric, puzzled, asks what kind of protection Ian means. Ian explains that the magic he plans to use will put him in a trance-like state. If something were to go wrong, Ian needs Lord Pierric to send magicians to inject mana into his brain so that he can wake up. Ian elaborates that, because no one has ever reached the 6th class, records on such magic are scarce. He recalls how, in his past life, he had to piece together spells from ancient, unknown texts once he reached the 6th class. Ian steps forward and announces that he's about to perform the magic, extending his arm. As he channels his mana, a series of magical patterns form a circle on the floor. Then, 2 clones of Ian materialize inside the circle, while Ian's real body collapses. Lord Pierric rushes to catch Ian before he hits the ground. In awe, he watches the 2 clones of Ian, unsure how such magic is even possible. This is puppet play, a rare spell only usable by magicians of the 6th class or higher. The caster enters a trance and becomes a puppeteer, while the clones, puppets, can move freely and even cast powerful 5th class magic. The 2 puppets walk toward the door, and just before leaving, one turns to Lord Pierric, still cradling Ian's real body. The puppet states that it is leaving, but reassures Lord Pierric that Ian's true body is safe in his hands. Hayden is on cloud 9, overjoyed to see Ian. He happily sings about how Ian came for him and rushes over to him, grabbing his hands with emotion, telling him that their hearts must be aligned because he truly missed him. Herbert, holding his staff, steps closer to them, curious about who arrived. Spotting Ian, he addresses him directly, commenting that it's Ian. He then mentions he heard from Lord Pierric that Ian had succeeded in his mission, though it was so tough that Ian even fainted. He praises Ian for achieving such a great accomplishment for the Empire. Ian bows his head slightly, and humbly responds that he is merely doing his duty as a high-ranking magician. Herbert, clearly wanting to know more, asks Ian what has been on his mind since he first saw him. He inquires why Ian is here, since Herbert was certain he told him to go to the Ivory Tower and rest. As Herbert starts to ask if Ian hasn't heard what's been happening with his family, Ian calmly explains that he did receive a letter from the Ivory Tower. However, after completing his mission, he was given an imperial order to join the delegation and assist the Crown Prince immediately. Ian pulls out a rolled-up letter to show Herbert, asking if he can read it for a moment. Ian agrees, handing the letter over. After reading it, Herbert, deep in thought, reflects on how he assumed they'd try everything to keep Ian out, but never expected him to give up his family and rush here. Herbert rolls the letter back up and comments that he recognizes the Emperor's imperial order, but asserts that it would be impossible for Ian to join the delegation. Hayden, taken aback and furious, yells at Herbert, asking if he's ridiculing the Emperor's direct order. Calmly, Herbert responds that this is a matter of trust between the 3 countries involved. The number of people and bodyguards in the delegation has already been set, and changing that number isn't an option. This was agreed upon in the negotiations, he explains, and mutual trust between the diplomats is essential. How then can they just add someone, especially a high-ranking magician, into the delegation at this stage? Herbert states that he believes the Emperor would understand why he can't allow Ian in. Ian, though, realizes that Herbert's argument is sound. While the countries may not be at war, their shared history of conflict means that safety and careful planning are paramount. The treaty in place has been built on these principles. He further analyzes that there are already 3 high-ranking magicians in the delegation, including Herbert himself. Adding another, especially one as powerful as Ian, could throw the entire treaty into disarray. Ian remarks that diplomacy is based on trust and reasonable explanations, and thus he understands the Tower Master's concerns. Herbert turns to leave, telling Ian that if he understands the situation, he should return. He adds that Ian being here in the city could cause problems for their diplomatic efforts. While he sympathizes with Ian for coming all this way after completing his mission, he insists that there's nothing more he can do. He'll explain things to the Emperor separately. Before Herbert can finish, Ian speaks up, proposing a possibility. He asks that if one of the high-ranking magicians gives up their spot in the delegation, could he then replace them and join? He reasons that since this is about a direct order, there should be some flexibility. Herbert turns slightly, preparing to answer, but Ian cuts him off before he can ask who would give up their spot. The person to interrupt him is Ronan. Stepping forward, Ronan raises his hand and boldly claims that he will give up his spot in the delegation. The room goes silent as everyone, including Hayden and Herbert, stares at him in disbelief. Herbert asks Ronan if he's serious. Ronan confidently affirms his decision, asking if they are not all citizens of the Empire. He goes on to say that no citizen would defy imperial orders. Even if it complicates diplomacy, the delegation's mission is to represent the Empire, and that is an honorable duty. However, if by stepping down he can help balance both the Emperor's orders and diplomatic relations, he will gladly make that sacrifice. Ronan then bows to Hayden, stating that he will now hand over his sacred mission to Ian Paige, and requests that Hayden grant Ian the chance to take his place. Hayden, still processing the situation, agrees to Ronan's request, expressing his admiration for Ronan's loyalty to the Empire. He orders Ronan to prepare himself to return to the capital safely. Ronan bows again, thanking Hayden for his grace. Ronan then turns to Ian, telling him that he is entrusting his mission to him. He asks Ian to ensure that he fulfills the task without fail. Ian, genuinely grateful, thanks Ronan for his trust. Ronan is a high-ranking magician, and based on Ian's memories from his past life, he was one of the few decent magicians. While Ronan is known for his uncompromising nature, his loyalty isn't to the Tower Master or the Ivory Tower. It's rooted in his own belief in the power of magic. Ian reflects that, in exchange for teaching Ronan a few powerful spells that even Herbert doesn't know, Ronan has easily switched his allegiance to Ian's side. Finally, Ronan bows one last time, stating that since a high-ranking magician not in the delegation is in the city, as Herbert said, it could cause diplomatic issues. Herbert, seething with anger, thinks to himself how he had initially underestimated Ian, assuming he was just some clueless kid. But now, it's clear Ian has already established himself in the Ivory Tower. Herbert glares at Ian, who is pointedly ignoring him, and silently swears that he won't let someone like Ian spoil his long-held plans to turn the Empire into the Ivory Tower's empire. Meanwhile, the crowd is abuzz with chatter, and Ragnar, who's been quietly observing, continues to fix his gaze on Ian, possibly already plotting his next move. Demodera is a city known for its neutrality and independence, not aligning with any specific nation. Recognized as the diplomatic bridge between 3 powerful countries, it has stood as a symbol of freedom and neutrality for over a century. As the delegations begin arriving for the 3-country treaty discussions, the 19th mayor, N'Golo Neville, warmly greets them. Hayden, curious about the arrangements, asks where the other delegates are staying. N'Golo informs him that each delegation has its own designated VIP mansion, pointing to a lavish building where the Green River delegates will be housed. He also gestures to another impressive mansion, explaining that it has been set aside for the Crown Prince, a private space for the most important guests. Hayden, surveying the grand mansions, remarks on their magnificence. Turning to the Tower Master, he inquires if there are any other events scheduled for the day. The Tower Master responds that there is nothing planned until the treaty discussion itself. Hayden, pleased with the situation, orders everyone to go rest and then directs Ian to follow him as he plans to go out. Ragnar, watching the interaction, calls the Tower Master aside once Hayden moves to his mansion. Ragnar leads the Tower Master to his room and begins speaking. He assures the Tower Master that he won't hold him accountable for the events that transpired recently, but expresses concern about the magician, Ian, who has been sticking close to his brother. He admits feeling uneasy about this. The Tower Master listens intently before replying, saying that while Ian Paige is indeed powerful in magic, The upcoming treaty discussions require diplomacy, not magic. He reassures Ragnar that Ian will not be able to contribute much to the meeting, as he would not even have the chance to speak, even if he had something important to say. The high-ranking magicians, he states, are nothing more than accessories in such a diplomatic event. The Tower Master goes on to assure Ragnar that, as planned, he will be the one leading the treaty discussions. This calms Ragnar slightly, and he sighs, acknowledging that there is little he can do about Ian, even if he bothers him. He admits to the Tower Master that he has tried repeatedly to win Ian over as an ally, but has failed each time. However, Ragnar warns that leaving Ian to his own devices will only lead to bigger problems in the future. He gives the Tower Master a firm order, hoping he will take care of Ian as soon as possible. The Tower Master bows respectfully, promising that everything will unfold according to the Fifth Prince's wishes. Meanwhile, Hayden sits in his room, admiring the artifacts around him. He casually mentions how he heard the night streets of Demodera have great performances, and how there will be plenty to see and enjoy. He turns to Ian and Oliver, suggesting that since they need to sneak out, they should buy a few clothes to blend in. He orders Oliver to run a few errands, but Ian interrupts him. Hayden, surprised by Ian's sudden seriousness, asks what's wrong. Ian stares at him for a moment and sighs, asking if Hayden is aware of the situation he is in. He reminds Hayden that he is not just the Crown Prince of the Green River Empire, but also the key figure in the treaty negotiations. He sternly tells Hayden that he's not here to play around and should abandon any thoughts of going out. Hayden, trying to downplay the seriousness, weakly replies that there's still plenty of time before the treaty discussion. Ian, frustrated, counters that preparation should begin now. Hayden looks to Oliver, who nervously averts his gaze. Ian continues, explaining that the first speaker from their delegation will be Hayden, and if he is unable to speak, the Fifth Prince will take his place. Hayden mutters that his father had mentioned this, and Ian reassures him that if that happens, the Fifth Prince will take control of the discussions. Hayden, shaking his head, insists he doesn't want that to happen, but admits he feels unprepared. He confesses that the topics, military strength, commodities, land, and slave distribution, are far outside his realm of expertise. He feels he has no one to support him, and no one would want to help him either. Looking up at Ian, Hayden asks if it would not be better to remain silent than risk humiliating himself. Ian, seeing that Hayden is giving up, reminds him that this is exactly the attitude that will allow Ragnar to win. He emphasizes that Hayden is the only piece on the board capable of delivering the greatest blow to Ragnar's plans. Ian assures him that it is vital that Hayden takes the lead in the discussions, as it's his chance to prove himself. With a snap of his fingers, hundreds of papers filled with crucial notes begin to swirl around the room. Ian walks toward Hayden, stating that the Emperor has specifically instructed him to help and support the Crown Prince. This is Hayden's opportunity to achieve something on his own. Ian continues, explaining that his orders are to ensure the Fifth Prince does not steal this opportunity from Hayden. He intends to help him take control of the treaty discussions by preparing him thoroughly. With another snap, the doors of the room lock automatically, and Ian makes it clear that from this moment until the treaty discussion, Hayden must memorize everything. 1 week later, in Demodera, as the day for the three-country treaty discussion approaches, delegations begin arriving at the main hall. Ragnar, without turning, casually asks the Tower Master if it is true that his older brother has been staying inside the mansion for the entire week without coming out, and whether anything has happened to him. The Tower Master replies that this had been troubling him as well, so he had placed surveillance on the mansion where the Crown Prince is staying, but nothing unusual occurred. He adds that Hayden is only seen occasionally in the garden, looking extremely tired. At that moment, Hayden, along with Ian and Oliver, approaches from the opposite end of the hall. Ragnar greets him with a smile, asking if he had a good rest the previous night. Hayden weakly replies that he did. Ragnar, smiling again, says he's glad to hear that. When Hayden doesn't respond, Ragnar, still smiling, mentions that he'll head to the conference room with the delegation first, and moves past them. Ian looks at him for a moment before turning to Hayden, who remains standing with a tense expression. Ian reassures him not to worry, reminding him that he has already done everything he could over the past week to prepare for the treaty discussion, and that Hayden will be the one to take the lead. Hayden listens to him, and after a brief pause, he looks up with a determined expression and offers Ian a smile. In the conference room, the mayor, Angolo Neville, introduces himself as the one tasked with arbitrating the treaty discussion. He states that he is the 19th mayor of Demodera and will oversee the proceedings, ensuring that all details of the discussion are recorded. The delegations take their seats around a round table, and Angolo continues, urging them to keep his words in mind as the meeting begins. The first to speak is Maxwell Benet, the successor of the Duke Benet family and the authority figure representing the Principality of Ro. He mentions the difficulty in procuring troops and supplies due to the narrow and dangerous roads leading to their principality. He continues, stating that they are requesting magicians and elite knights instead of foot soldiers, and money in place of commodities, an arrangement they have already agreed upon with the Coldwood Empire. He quickly clarifies that if the Green River Empire has any objections, they are prepared to restart the discussion. Ian reflects on the fact that the first topic being addressed is the subjugation force. He glances at Hayden and encourages him to speak as they practiced. Just as the fifth prince is about to begin his speech, Hayden interrupts, announcing that the person in charge of military matters will be their empire's general and undefeated commander, Sir Duncan Miltos. He entrusts the matter to Sir Duncan. Maxwell wonders if the fifth prince is the one in charge, but Hayden reassures everyone that with an expert like Sir Duncan present, there is no need for further discussion on the matter. He turns towards Sir Duncan and directly asks for his opinion. Sir Duncan meekly agrees to take on the responsibility and shares his thoughts on the Principality of Roe's request. Ian observes the exchange and thinks that this is a good strategy, and as long as they continue in this manner, the discussion will go smoothly. The conversation progresses as each delegation presents their opinions and young leaders continue their negotiations. As the discussion nears its end, Crown Prince Hector Coldwood of the Coldwood Empire speaks up. He states that splitting the land into 3 parts without any careful planning, especially with borders so close to each other, is hindering the fair division of the land. He points out that the quality of natural resources and land varies across the vast territory, and while some nations may strike a jackpot, others could end up with worthless land. He explains that some countries will inevitably face losses, which could lead to serious conflicts. He suggests that while feeling bad is a mild way of putting it, in reality, it could potentially spark a war. Ian observes the passive expressions around the conference table and reflects on how this is the most critical point of the treaty discussion, the division of lands and natural resources after the subjugation. Hector concludes by saying that the Coldwood Empire does not seek conflict and is content as long as peace can be maintained for the next 1,000 or even 10,000 years. He urges anyone with a good proposal to speak up, suggesting they should enjoy their shared resources without harboring ill feelings. Ragnar looks toward the Tower Master and nods, prompting him to speak. However, Hayden interrupts once more, confidently declaring that he knows of a method. All eyes turn toward him as he smirks, asserting that his solution is foolproof. Hayden announces that he has a method, and after a brief silence, the mayor asks him to share what he has in mind. Hayden begins by mentioning the Empire's ivory tower, but quickly corrects himself, saying that it's actually their new magic tower that has developed a new magic. This magic allows them to detect and roughly quantify the minerals buried beneath a specific area. This revelation shocks both Ragnar and the Tower Master, who stare at Hayden in disbelief. The Tower Master is stunned, wondering how Hayden could possibly know about this. Maxwell quickly asks if it's true and Hayden confirms it. He then explains that they must have heard rumors about the magician behind this magic and introduces the Empire's youngest high-ranking magician, Sir Ian Paige, the creator of this magic. As the room fills with questions, the Tower Master wonders if Hayden had the same insight he did, that the magic for detecting minerals would be crucial to the treaty discussion. He looks at Ian, trying to understand how he could have seen through the core of the discussion. Hayden continues by explaining that they plan to use this magic to create a resource map. Since they need to determine the value of the land, the completed map will allow them to divide the Great Plains into plots for the countries, based on specific requirements. While the boundaries may not be perfect, this land is intended to be cultivated and mined for generations. Ragnar glares at the Crown Prince, but the mayor asserts that there is no better solution than this. Hayden concludes his explanation, stating that this is all he has to offer and then sits back down. Outside, Oliver waits as Hayden calls him over, with Ian following behind. Hayden excitedly tells Oliver that he should have seen how he completely turned the meeting upside down. He laughs about how Ragnar and the Tower Master's faces were priceless, expressing regret that Oliver wasn't there to witness it. Hayden sighs and says he'll fill Oliver in on the details later, but for now, they should grab a drink and tour the city. He turns to Ian, asking if he will join them, noting that he won't get many chances like this again. Ian weakly nods, causing Hayden to smile brightly, as he had likely expected Ian to decline. He pats Ian's shoulder, encouraging him to accept the drinks Hayden is offering now that he's almost an adult. Hayden assures Ian that he will personally teach him how to drink. At that moment, Ragnar approaches and calls out to the Crown Prince. He bows slightly, complimenting Hayden for his impressive performance and saying that he learned a lot from him. Hayden hesitates, then smiles weakly, expressing his gladness at hearing that. He adds that he too had hoped to learn much from the treaty discussion and encourages Ragnar to keep improving. He even offers to give him advice whenever needed. Ragnar clenches his teeth and walks away. Hayden turns back to Ian with a bright smile, declaring that today is truly the best day of his life. He suggests they make up for the restraint of the past week and go all out today. He tells Oliver to be casual as well, As he looks at Ian for confirmation, something catches his eye. His expression quickly shifts as he urgently asks Ian what is happening to his hands. Everyone turns to Ian, who looks down to see his hands slowly disappearing. Ian calmly explains that his limit has been reached. Hayden orders Ian to explain in a way he can understand, but Ian simply apologizes and says he will have to accept Hayden's drinks at the Imperial Castle instead, as his body continues to fade. Hayden reaches out to him, but Ian tells him that he will explain everything at the Imperial Castle. Then Ian vanishes entirely, leaving everyone in shock. The Tower Master clenches his fists, realizing that it was a clone all along. He is baffled, thinking to himself that clones aren't supposed to exist, yet Ian managed to accomplish everything with one. They had all been completely deceived by Ian Paige. One of Sir Ian's servants brings him his food while he's still sleeping. Lord Fearig tells the servant to set the food aside since Sir Ian is resting. It had been several days since it was mentioned that Ian had slowed his metabolism with his magic, and it was becoming clear that he was growing weaker. Lord Fearig felt the need to call for a mage to wake him, but before he could do so, Sir Ian stirs and tells him there's no need for that. Lord Fearig then asks him how he's feeling, whether he's well or not. Sir Ian, being honest, admits that he doesn't feel well at all. He has a headache and can barely move. Lord Fearig grows concerned and suggests calling a doctor for him, but Sir Ian refuses, saying he only wants food because he's extremely hungry. As Sir Ian prepares to leave, Lord Fearig asks him if he's sure he doesn't want to stay for one more night, even though he understands Ian must be busy. Sir Ian refuses, telling him that he should be the one grateful, as he didn't do anything more than his duty as a High Mage, just as any other High Mage would have done. But Lord Fearig disagrees. While it's true that other High Mages would have driven out the monsters, they would have simply done that and then left. Nothing more. Lord Fearig reflects on the first time he met Sir Ian, admitting that he had his doubts about what a young boy could possibly do against such a massive army of monsters. But Ian proved him wrong. In just 10 days, Ian accomplished what Lord Fearig himself couldn't do in years. He solved the problem. That alone showed that Ian possessed something that no one else had. Finally, Lord Fearig mentions the oath, telling Ian that he's heard Lord Morgan of the North swore the oath of the honored guest to him 5 years ago. Now he wishes to have the East swear that same oath to Ian as well. Ian is caught off guard by Lord Fearig's casual approach to the matter, but Lord Fearig's faith and affection for him are clear. Lord Fearig asks for Ian's permission, hoping he's okay with the idea. He wants to name Ian as his honored guest, not out of a desire to return a favor, but because it's something Lord Fearig truly wants. Ian, the only 6th-class mage in the Empire, would be the honored guest on Lord Fearig's lands, a gesture born out of Lord Fearig's own will, not because he expects anything in return. He's confident that neither he nor Ian will regret it. Ian, however, isn't sure if swearing an oath meant to last 1,000 years should be something done so spontaneously. Still, he has no intention of turning it down. Lord Fearig moves forward with the formalities for the oath of 1,000 years, reassuring Ian that it won't take long. His family will always welcome Ian, no matter when he visits, and they swear to always be at his service if he ever needs help from the East. He wishes that the oath will last for generations on both sides, and with a little embarrassment, he swears it by the easternmost stream of the Emerald River. Ian can't help but think how simple and nice it would be if they could just say, "Their oath is sworn," and be done with it. But as it stands, he looks forward to a brighter future alongside Lord Fearig. Lord Fearig asks Ian to let him know whenever he plans to visit, as he wants to show him what a proper feast from the East looks like. Ian agrees, feeling the weight of how much has happened in such a short time. Afterwards, Ian reflects on the unexpected gift he's received and the next steps ahead. He needs to track down the person who enchanted the staff and figure out how they managed to bring back black magic after 300 years, all while knowing there are plenty of questions awaiting him back in the capital. Ian returned to his place, and as soon as he stepped inside, his mother rushed to him, visibly concerned. She asked where he had gone, as he had disappeared without a word, which made her worry. Her shock deepened when she saw how weak and thin Ian had become, and she immediately became even more worried. She questioned him, asking what in the world he had put himself through. She even thought that Lord Fearig didn't know how to take care of someone who had traveled such a long way to help him. Her heart broke seeing him in such a state. Ian reassured her, telling her that it was a long story, but he would soon be better. He handed her a telesphere, crafted from mana crystals, which he had stopped by the workshop to have made on his way back. This device would allow her to communicate with him any time, even if he was in the city. He also apologized for scaring her, and promised not to disappear like that again. Douglas, who had been watching, asked about the magic Ian had just shown. He explained that he had learned many kinds of magic at the academy, but had never seen anything like this. He was curious how Ian could be in Demethera and at the castle at the same time, wondering if it was some kind of mirror trick or a life-size doll. Ian, smiling, asked Douglas to take things one question at a time. He explained that it was one of the perks of being a 6th class mage, which left Douglas confused. If Ian was a 6th class mage, did that mean his class was higher than any other mage in the Empire? Ian reassured him to relax, saying he was still the same Ian Paige they all knew. Douglas, undeterred, told Ian that he was going to try a potion he had made earlier that morning and invited Ian to join him. Ian declined, explaining that while he would have loved to, he had another invitation. He made his way to the location, feeling a bit unsure as he took in the unfamiliar environment. However, as soon as he arrived, people began welcoming him warmly, telling him that the celebration had been prepared just for him. They asked him to take a seat and handed him a drink, congratulating him on becoming a 6th class mage. They proudly mentioned that they had the finest wine in the royal castle just for this occasion. Ian, who rarely drank wine in the past, decided to give it a try. He took a glass, drank it all in one go, and surprisingly, he liked it. The group, noticing, mentioned that His Highness should hear about what had happened in Demetera. Sir Oliver poured him another glass and advised him to slow down, joking that if he drank too much, he might accidentally blow the whole building away with a magic missile. Ian was surprised to see His Highness so informal with his knights, and asked Sir Oliver if that was really appropriate. Sir Oliver smiled and explained that every man in that room had sworn loyalty to His Highness, the Crown Prince, and could therefore be trusted. Ian seemed a little confused, prompting Sir Oliver to observe that Ian probably didn't have many friends, given his cautious demeanor. He then recalled their first conversation at Mogrian's castle when Ian had captured Lady Cecilia, who turned out to be a spy. Sir Oliver also remembered that, despite Ian having just fought a 3rd class mage, Ian didn't appear exhausted. It made him realize that Ian was very skilled at hiding his feelings, almost like a veteran trained for years not to show any emotion. It made him think, how insidious that boy is. Sir Oliver then noted that Ian probably didn't have any friends to talk to. He chuckled, saying he had an eye for character. Ian, hearing this, felt a pang of sadness. He agreed, but also mentioned that there was someone he once considered a friend, though their ending wasn't quite as impressive. Sir Oliver, intrigued, tried to figure out what kind of person Ian's friend had been. He reflected on his 5 years of training with Ian, and said that whenever they talked like this, it felt like speaking to a middle-aged man, not someone his age. Ian smiled and acknowledged Sir Oliver's sharp eye for character. He then joked that he was actually turning 48 that year and had been using magic to maintain his youthful appearance, laughing at the absurdity of it. He reminded Sir Oliver of his earlier remark about him being an insidious little boy who sometimes got too serious with his jokes. Ian asked for forgiveness, and Sir Oliver, with a grin, forgave him as the bigger man. They both laughed, and Ian found it very kind of Sir Oliver. Ian stepped outside to get some fresh air, his head feeling heavy from the alcohol. He wasn't used to drinking so much. It was then that the vice captain appeared. Ian, a little surprised, asked what he was doing out there. The vice captain explained that he was hiding to get some air, as he wasn't a great drinker. In fact, his face turned red even from a single glass of wine. Ian nodded, mentioning that he was out there for the same reason. He admitted that feasts like those weren't really his thing. The vice captain then shared a story about Paul Lance, the vice captain of the 2nd Imperial Order of Knights. In his past life, Paul had been the 2nd best swordsman in the Empire. He came from humble beginnings, but his swordsmanship and loyalty had earned him his current position, gaining the trust of the Crown Prince and the captain. The vice captain shifted the conversation and asked Ian about his first time drinking. Ian shrugged, noting that it wasn't too bad, and that he'd actually enjoyed it for the first time in a while. The vice captain smiled and thanked Ian, saying his presence had managed to turn the stern old captain into a bit of a chatterbox. He also mentioned that he hadn't seen His Highness that happy in years. Ian appreciated the compliment but replied modestly, saying he was destined to become a great leader. All he was doing for the vice captain was offering a little nudge in the right direction. Seeing the captain happy made Ian feel a little closer to him. Just then, the vice captain received a call from inside. It was His Highness, complaining that if the vice captain didn't let him pour a drink, he'd be getting rid of him. The vice captain excused himself, saying he had to go back inside. Left alone, Ian stood there thinking about how the memories of his past life would no longer be of any help. The choices he had made had brought about significant changes, and those changes would eventually lead to a new ending for his story. At that moment, he realized that there was no way to predict how things would turn out, and all he could do was protect the ones he loved. Inside, the Highness questioned the Tower Master about the plan. The Tower Master reminded him that their goal was to eliminate Ian, and the usual answer was, "Please wait until I turn him into a useful weapon for us." The Highness was growing frustrated, feeling that Ian was always standing in their way. The Tower Master apologized, explaining that perhaps he'd been too careful. Who would have thought the young boy would rise to such prominence so quickly? He promised that there would be no more delays, and today would be the last time His Highness would have to wait. The Tower Master then presented Helene, asking her to show respect to her prince. The Highness confirmed that she was the High Mage who had disappeared some years ago. Helene uncovered her face and expressed how honored she was to finally meet him. The Tower Master reassured His Highness not to be alarmed, emphasizing that she was human and above all loyal. She would give her life at the snap of a finger if that was what His Highness desired. The Tower Master then explained that Helene practiced the forbidden art of black magic. He was confident that it wouldn't be long before Paige would fall to his knees before them. The Tower Master assured His Highness that there was nothing to worry about anymore. The only thing left was for him to claim his rightful place on the throne. Herbert Leon called out for Marco, and when Marco entered, he seemed confused, as if something was wrong. But the Tower Master wasn't concerned with that. Instead, he was remembering the first time he saw Marco more than 20 years ago. Back then, Marco had been nothing more than a tiny baby, so it's likely that he wouldn't even remember the moment. However, Herbert remembered it clearly, an abandoned baby, wrapped in rags, smiling up at him. He watched Marco turn over and get up on his own 2 feet for the first time, and seeing him grow over the years filled him with joy. Herbert even admitted that watching Marco grow had been so fulfilling that sometimes he forgot his own duties. He marveled at the fact that the baby, not only possessing innate talent, had the determination to become a successful wizard. It amazed him. The Tower Master wanted Marco to know just how proud he was of him. Marco, humbled, thanked him, attributing all his success to Herbert's generous support. Herbert, wanting to repay Marco in some way, was prepared to do anything Marco asked. However, he had called him there that day for a favor. If Marco had no plans that night, Herbert asked if he would visit him at his manor. Marco agreed. Ardal welcomed Paige, the youngest High Mage of the Ivory Tower, with a certain warmth. However, was confused about how Ardal knew who he was. In their line of work, there wasn't a soul who didn't know Ian's name. Ardal thanked for visiting his humble residence, but quickly got to the point, questioning what had brought him there. Reassuring him not to worry, explained that he was simply another client looking to buy information. Specifically, wanted everything Ardal had on black magic. Ardal, a bit surprised, remarked that he'd thought someone like would already know more about black magic than they did. Clarified that he was after something that might seem petty or preposterous. Ardal understood exactly what was seeking. What wanted was related to something they'd recently been investigating, and it seemed like he had arrived at just the right time. Ardal then asked if he was familiar with the Order of Dragons. Confessed that he knew about them, one of the many cults in the Empire that worshipped dragons as deities. While no one knew for certain how old the cult was, it was clear that they had existed for over 100 years. The Order of Dragons had originally started as a religious group in a small village. According to a grave robber who had claimed to have met the last descendants of dragons, the group was led by a lord who wanted to spread the new truth with superhuman powers. At first, no one believed him, thinking he was a fraud. But as time passed, more and more people came to believe in the order, and now, no one knew exactly how many followers or leaders there were. Everything about them was shrouded in secrecy, and while rumors had circulated, including claims of bringing the dead back to life or brainwashing people, nothing concrete had ever been revealed. Ardal wasn't sure if the descendants of dragons actually existed, but considering the rumors and the bits of information they had gathered, one possibility seemed most likely. He was quite certain that the Order of Dragons was affiliated with black magic. Recently, some of the Empire's most renowned families had been found to have connections with the Order. This suggested that their black magic needed resources beyond mana or non-human entities, and the Order had the connections to procure those resources. The Order was highly exclusive, with only a select few chosen to join, which made identifying all of its members difficult. But who would be more interested in controlling people through brainwashing than those in power? This was all the information Ardal could give for now, as their investigation was still ongoing. However, he promised to send a letter if they discovered anything useful. Thanked him and urged him to continue the investigation. Later, reflected on what he had learned. He'd never heard of the Order of Dragons in his past life, and if they had been around for over 100 years, surely he should have known their name. His thoughts wandered to the Shaman King he had met on the